The cops almost cuffed me for trespassing on my own property. The woman who called them? She wasn't just my worst neighbor. She was secretly my tenant. She thought she ran the lake with her fake HOA, until the day she found out who actually owned her $800,000 mansion. The morning started, like every other at Lake Serenity, quiet, crisp, and pure enough to make you forget the world ever went mad. Mist rolled across the water like slow-moving smoke, and the loons were calling their hollow songs somewhere in the distance. I was halfway through my first sip of coffee when I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel, the low hum of engines, and then the flash of red and blue lights slicing through the trees. For a second, I thought maybe someone had wrecked their truck on the county road again. But no, the lights were coming my way. 2 sheriff cruisers rolled into my driveway like they were arriving at a crime scene. The first one stopped 10 feet from my porch. The second boxed me in near the boat shed. Doors opened in sync, and out stepped 2 deputies, one young and stiff, like he'd just graduated from the academy, the other older, with that permanent frown that comes from 20 years of dealing with nonsense calls. The younger one touched his radio and said, "Sir, are you Marcus Shaw?" "Last I checked," I said, setting my mug down on the railing. "You're being accused of trespassing and making threats against a female resident. We need you to step back from the property. Trespassing. On my own land." I actually laughed. "You might want to double-check your GPS, officer." "I own this property." The older deputy, his namatag reading Peterson, gave a slow sigh. He'd heard this tone before, the weary sound of a man who already knew he was about to waste taxpayer money. "Mind if we see some proof, sir?" "Not at all." I reached into the old fishing chest by the porch and pulled out a weathered folder. Inside was the deed to my grandfather's cabin, dated 1963. Notarized and sealed by the same county they were standing in. I handed it over. Peterson scanned it, eyebrows rising. The younger one shifted awkwardly. "Sir," Peterson said finally, "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." Nodding toward the lake, and I can guess exactly who's behind it, because there she was. Across the water, standing on her oversized deck like the self-appointed queen of suburbia, Brenda Carmichael, a newest neighbor and self-declared HOA president, pink bathrobe, phone in hand. Finger pointed straight at me like she was Moses parting the Red Sea. She yelled something I couldn't quite make out, but I caught a few familiar words: trespassing, illegal dock, and arrest him. I almost felt sorry for the deputies. Almost. Peterson handed back my deed and said under his breath, "She'll call the cops often?" "Every other Tuesday," I said. "Last week it was because my wind chimes violated her noise ordinance. Before that, my boat didn't fit the aesthetic." He snorted. "Sounds like a real peach. You have no idea." The younger deputy's radio crackled, and I could hear Brenda's voice screaming through dispatch. "He's dangerous. He threatened to destroy the HOA." Peterson rolled his eyes so hard I thought he'd strained something. "Mr. Shaw," he said finally, "you're good here. Just maybe avoid her property line for a bit, all right?" "Oh, I have no intention of going anywhere near that circus," I said, retrieving my coffee. "But you might want to tell her the next time she calls about me, she's technically filing a false report." Peterson paused halfway to his cruiser door, brow furrowed. "Technically?" "Yeah," I said, turning toward the water, watching Brenda pace her deck like a rabid mall manager. "Because technically, that mansion she's standing in is mine." Both deputies froze. The younger one blinked. "Wait, what?" I smiled. The kind of slow grin that only comes when you realize the universe has a wicked sense of humor. "She doesn't know it yet," I said, sipping the last of my coffee. "She's been paying rent to the man she's been trying to run off this lake." The lake was silent. Even the birds seemed to stop mid-song. Peterson shook his head and muttered, "Lord, I'm going to need a bigger cup of coffee." As they pulled away, I watched the reflection of their lights fade off the water until only the soft ripple of waves remained. Brenda was still out there, shouting into her phone, convinced she'd won, if only she knew what was coming. Asterisk. 3 years before that morning circus with flashing lights and angry bathrobes, life had been quiet, beautifully, achingly quiet. After 20 years in military logistics, I'd spent too many nights hearing diesel engines and shouted orders. Too many mornings waking up to sandstorms or silence that felt like loss. Then the divorce hit, a drawn-out legal war that left my house, my savings, and my faith in people scattered like shell casings after a firefight. When the lawyer handed me my grandfather's will, I didn't expect much. A cabin on Lake Serenity, he said, like it was a consolation prize. But the first time I drove up that gravel road and saw the water through the pines, something inside me unclenched for the first time in years. The cabin was an old A-frame built in the 60-seater walls, weathered gray by Minnesota winters. Windows that looked out on a private stretch of shoreline, and a dock so worn smooth it felt like glass under bare feet. Every morning, I'd step outside with steaming coffee and breathe in that clean pine needle air. No horns, no deadlines, no people trying to control you, just loons calling across water still as a mirror. It was freedom, pure and simple. Neighbors waved when they passed by on boats, then minded their own business, a code I deeply respected. Around the lake, everyone lived by 3 simple rules. Wave when you see each other, help when someone's in trouble, and mind your own damn business the rest of the time. My grandfather used to say, "This lake doesn't just reflect the sky. It reflects your peace," and he was right. I fixed up the old place with my own hands, repaired the dock, sanded the floors, learned the satisfying rhythm of an honest day's work that doesn't end with an email. At night, the wind moved through the trees like whispers from an older world, one where people built things that lasted. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch listening to the water slap gently against the posts and think, this is what healing feels like. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. The lake didn't care who you were before you came in, only asked that you respect it. And for 2 perfect years, that's exactly what I did, until the morning a pontoon boat with chrome rails and much perfume sliced through the mist like a glittering shark. Standing on the deck was a woman wearing a blinding white cardigan and a smile. Sharp enough to cut glass, she waved like a politician greeting voters. "You who?" "Hello there, neighbor." That was the first time I heard the name Brenda Carmichael, the self-proclaimed president of the Lake Serenity Homeowners Association. A title that didn't actually exist, at least. Not until she decided it should. From that moment, peace became a luxury I could no longer afford. I remember that morning like a scene from a movie that starts out calm but hides a storm behind the next cut. The lake was glassy, reflecting the clouds like a perfect mirror. I was sitting on the dock with a mug of black coffee, watching a loon drift across the water when the tranquility broke, a deep, throaty engine tearing through the mist. At first, I thought it was some tourist lost in the wrong bay, but no. This boat gleamed like it had been polished with arrogance. Chrome rails, twin outboards, a sound system blasting soft pop music across the still morning air, and standing on the bow like she owned the entire lake was her. Blonde bob haircut, white capris, cardigan so bright it could probably signal satellites. She was waving at me with the kind of over-enthusiasm reserved for people who need everyone to notice them. "You who?" "Hello there, neighbor." I gave her a polite wave, hoping she'd keep going. Instead, she steered the pontoon directly toward my dock like a guided missile made of entitlement. "I'm Brenda Carmichael," she announced, stepping onto my dock before I could even respond. "President of the Lake Serenity Homeowners Association." She said it like she expected trumpets to play. I blinked. "We have a homeowners association?" "Of course we do," she said, pulling a manila folder from a pristine leather tote. "I'm here on official HOA business." She spread papers across my wooden railing as if this was a board meeting. Her perfume hit like chemical warfare, something between lilac and motor oil, according to our updated aesthetic standards. Flipping through the papers with manicured precision, "Your property is, unfortunately, non-compliant." "Non-compliant," I repeated, wondering if I'd accidentally joined a dystopian novel. "Yes, that aluminum fishing boat has got to go. It clashes with the natural, visual harmony of the shoreline. And frankly," she gestured dramatically, "all this fishing gear makes the area look cluttered." Stared at her. My clutter was a handmade rod rack my grandfather carved in 1972, in a tackle box older than her HOA dreams. "Lady," said carefully, "this property's been in my family since before you were born. There's no HOA listed on my deed, and there won't be one as long as I'm breathing." Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes hardened, icy blue, calculating. "Oh, I see. One of those?" "One of what?" "The non-contributors," she said sweetly, the word dripping like poison honey. "People who think the rules don't apply to them. But don't worry, Mr. Shaw. We'll get you on board soon enough." She snapped her folder shut, heels clicking on my dock like a gavel hitting wood. Then she turned, flashing that tight smile again. "We can't have declining influences around the lake, can we?" I sipped my coffee. "Ma'am, the only declining influence around here is the quality of your manners." For a second, her mask slipped. Just a flicker, eyes narrowing, jaw tightening. Then it was back. "We'll see about that, won't we, soldier boy?" The words hit different. Not just because she'd done her research, but because she said it with venom. Like my service was something to mock, not respect. She revved the pontoon's engines and tore away, her wake slamming into my dock so hard it spilled my coffee. The smell of exhaust and perfume lingered long after she was gone. I watched the ripples fade across the water, each one carrying a new thought I didn't like. That wasn't just some nosy neighbor. That was someone who'd decided this lake was her kingdom, and me. I'd just been drafted into her war, 3 mornings later. I stepped onto my porch and found an envelope taped to the front door. Bright red letters across the top. Notice of violation. At first, I thought it was junk mail or a prank from one of the marina guys. But when I tore it open, I nearly spit out my coffee. Inside was the most official-looking piece of nonsense I'd ever seen. Thick letterhead that read Lake Serenity Homeowners Association in gold cursive, stamped with a fake seal that looked like it had been printed off Google Images. Below that, in bold crimson ink, "You are in violation of community standards. Failure to comply may result in fines, property liens, or legal action." They'd even added a case number LS1185 like it was an FBI file. My offenses included dock aesthetic noncompliance, improper shoreline maintenance, unauthorized display of fishing equipment. Apparently, my tackle box was a threat to civilization. At the bottom, in dramatic legalese, was the fine, $500 payable within 30 days. And the signature? Brenda Carmichael, HOA president. I actually laughed out loud. It was the kind of laugh that comes when disbelief turns into something sharper. The woman wasn't just bossy. She was manufacturing authority out of thin air. But here's the thing about fighting nonsense. It only works if you stay calm while the other side drowns in their own paperwork. So I didn't tear it up. I didn't even post about it online. Instead, I grabbed my keys and headed into town. The Cedar Falls County Courthouse is one of those places that smells like old paper, coffee, and mild despair. The basement office was a maze of dusty file cabinets and flickering fluorescent lights. Behind the counter sat Dolores, a 70-something clerk who'd probably seen every bad idea in that county twice. She peered over her glasses as I slid the letter across the counter. "Another one of Brenda's victims?" she asked as if it were routine. "Victims?" I said. She chuckled softly. "Honey, you're the 5th person this month to show up with one of these homemade HOA letters. She's been in here 6 times asking how to enforce community compliance. I told her she doesn't have legal authority over a puddle, let alone this lake." Dolores pulled my property file, flipping through pages yellowed with time. Let's see. Deed recorded 1963, no covenants, no restrictions, and definitely no HOA. "Can I get a copy of that?" I asked. She winked. "Already printing one for the judge if she keeps this up." I left that courthouse holding my deed like a shield. On the drive home, something in me shifted. This wasn't just irritation anymore. It was a mission back at the cabin. I spread her fake notice across my kitchen table beside the official county records. The contrast was comical, hers full of bold fonts and fear tactics. Mine stamped and notarized by real authority. That's when I noticed something odd at the bottom of her letter, a registration number for Lake Serenity HOA. Ink. Curiosity got the better of me, so I looked it up online. Sure enough, she'd actually filed incorporation papers for a homeowners association with exactly 12 members out of 47 properties. Legally, it had about as much power over my land as a lemonade stand charter. I stared at the screen, half amused, half furious. She wasn't just pretending, she was trying to make it real. That's when my grandfather's voice echoed in my head. Before you fight City Hall, make sure you know who's really running the city. He was right. Brenda wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was building a paper-thin empire. She'd just declared me her first enemy. I poured myself another cup of coffee and looked out across the lake. Her mansion gleamed in the distance, smug as ever. All right, Brenda, I muttered. If it's war you want, I'll play your game. But I play to win. If there's one thing 20 years in the military teaches you, it's that every fight is won before it's fought. You just need the right intel. And Brenda, bless her heart, had left a trail so obvious. Even a rookie scout could follow it. I started with public records, county databases, business filings, property transfers, all free, all online. And what I found turned my irritation into something else entirely. Brenda's so-called Lake Serenity HOA wasn't just a hobby. She'd actually registered it as a nonprofit corporation 18 months earlier, complete with bylaws, officers, and meeting minutes. But here's the kicker. Only 12 people had signed up. Most of them short-term property investors who probably didn't even know they were members. What really caught my eye were the property transfers. Several lakefront cabins had changed ownership recently, not to individuals, but to a shell company called Carmichael Holdings, LLC. I followed that thread like a blood trail. Turns out, Brenda wasn't protecting the lake from declining influences. She was quietly buying or leasing vacation cabins and flipping them into unlicensed short-term rentals for Twin Cities tourists. Loud parties, jet skis, trash left on docks. All the things she accused me of causing, the irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. So, the self-proclaimed guardian of community standards was the very person destroying them, running an illegal rental empire behind the mask of an HOA president, and worse. She was getting away with it because everyone was too polite or too scared to challenge her. That needed to change. I started small, casual phone calls. Friendly chats with a few longtime residents. Hey, did you get a weird letter from the HOA? That's all it took. My phone blew up like a fireworks show. 8 different people messaged me with their own Brenda, horror stories, fake fines, threats. Even one woman who said Brenda tried to charge her for hanging wind chimes, not approved by the board. Then there was Janet, a retired librarian who lived 3 houses down. The kind of woman who alphabetized her spice rack and took detailed notes during church meetings. She'd been documenting Brenda's antics for months. When she showed up at my cabin carrying a binder thicker than a Bible, I knew I'd found my intelligence officer. Look here, she said, flipping pages with surgical precision. She's been threatening elderly residents, falsifying inspection reports, even forged a county letterhead once. I've got timestamps, screenshots, witness notes, everything. I couldn't help but grin. Janet, you just became deputy commander of the Lake Serenity Truth Squad. By nightfall. Our little squad had 6 members. Janet, the librarian. Tom, the marina guy. Florence, the 90-year-old fishing legend. And a few others who were just plain fed up. We created a private group chat and shared every message, photo, and letter we could find. The picture that emerged was both ridiculous and infuriating. Brenda had built her entire authority on fear and forged paperwork. That evening, as the sun dipped below the pines, I sat on my dock scrolling through the evidence. Across the lake, Brenda's mansion glowed gold in the dying light, its reflection rippling across the water like a mirage of power for 2 years. I'd thought this place was about peace. Turns out, it was about to become a battlefield. But this time, I wasn't alone. She had her fake board. I had the truth. She had her lakefront empire. I had a community ready to fight for theirs. As I logged off for the night, my phone buzzed with a message from Janet. I've been thinking. If she's breaking zoning laws, county code enforcement might want to see this. I smiled. Now you're thinking like a soldier. The war for Lake Serenity had just entered the intelligence phase. Asterisk. It didn't take long for Brenda to realize the tide was turning. One thing about bullies, they can smell when people stop being afraid. And nothing enrages them more than losing control. The first counterattack came 3 days after our truth squad started comparing notes. I woke up to find a bright orange notice nailed to my dock. County code enforcement pending review. It wasn't from the county. The font, the signature, even the logo, it all looked just wrong enough to make me laugh. Brenda was faking official documents again, but the real one came later that afternoon, a dusty white pickup pulling into my driveway. Inside was a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Morning," he said, stepping out and adjusting his cap. "Name's Tom Hindress, County Code Enforcement. I'm just following up on a few reports." I handed him a cup of coffee. "Let me guess," I said. "You got a call from Brenda?" He sighed like a man who'd already wasted too many hours on nonsense. "That obvious?" He went through the motions anyway, measured my dock, checked the supposed abandoned vehicle she'd reported, and flipped through his clipboard before shaking his head. "Between you and me, this is the 23rd complaint we've had from that address in 6 months. Woman's got the county office on speed dial." I smirked. Guess I should feel special. But then Tom leaned in a little closer, lowering his voice. "She tried to hand me $100 last time I was out here. Called it a consulting fee for creative interpretation of code." That's when I realized Brenda wasn't just bossy. She was testing the waters of small-town corruption. I thanked Tom, handed him the fake notice, and promised him another cup of coffee if he ever got called out again. He chuckled, muttering, "Wouldn't surprise me if I'm back tomorrow." That evening, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Florence texted first. She told me my bird feeder violates lake safety standards. Then Tom from the marina chimed in. "She's demanding dock fees she already owes me. Threatened to sue if I mention it." Janet sent screenshots of Brenda's latest Facebook post, a rambling manifesto accusing certain residents of waging cyberbullying campaigns against the HOA. She'd even tagged the local sheriff's department, like she was some kind of celebrity whistleblower. Poured myself another cup of coffee and scrawled through the chaos, half amused, half amazed. Brenda wasn't fighting fair, she was fighting loud. But she made a critical mistake. She underestimated how organized we'd become by now. Every member of the Truth Squad had a camera on their porch, time-stamped records of every conversation and copies of every fake notice. Brenda was fighting a shadow war against a neighborhood that had learned how to document everything. And, had something better, patience. Let her file her fake complaints. Every time she called a county office, every time she exaggerated a story, she dug herself a little deeper. 2 nights later, I saw her standing on her mansion's balcony, phone to her ear, pacing back and forth under the porch light. Her voice carried across the lake, clipped, angry, desperate. "No, you listen to me," she hissed into the phone. "If the county won't take action, I'll call the state. He's ruining this community. I don't care what it takes." The woman was unraveling in real time, and she didn't even know half the town was watching. I leaned back in my chair, the lake breeze cool on my face, the sound of crickets filling the silence between her shouted threats. I'd seen this pattern before in combat zones, in boardrooms, in messy divorces. People who abuse power always follow the same script. First they intimidate, then they escalate, and finally, they self-destruct. Brenda was somewhere between steps 2 and 3, and if she wanted war, she'd just declared it. It was barely past sunrise when I heard the crunch of tires again. Same sound, same gravel, same uneasy silence that comes before bad news. 2 sheriff cruisers pulled up, lights flashing in the fog, scattering the ducks off the shoreline. For a second, I wondered if Brenda had finally run out of county employees to harass and was now calling in the National Guard. The lead deputy stepped out tall. Mid-40s, the same tired expression as last time. Sergeant Peterson. The veteran cop with a coffee addiction and zero patience for nonsense. His partner was new, young, sharp-jawed, trying hard to look like he wasn't already regretting the shift. "Morning again, Mr. Shaw," Peterson said, adjusting his hat. "We received another complaint." I didn't even have to ask. "Let me guess. Brenda Carmichael," he nodded. "She claims you threatened her safety and trespassed on her property last night?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean when I was sitting here eating leftover chili and watching the twins lose?" "Yeah, that sounds dangerous." Peterson gave a weary smile. "Mind if we take a quick look around?" "Be my guest," I said, stepping aside as they checked the perimeter. Brenda stood across the water on her deck, phone pressed to her ear, pretending to whisper into it like she was feeding intelligence to the Pentagon. The woman had turned drama into an Olympic sport. When the deputies came back, I waved them toward the porch. "Before we go any further," I said, pulling out a hard drive, "you should probably see this." I plugged it into my laptop and played the footage from my dock camera, a timestamp from the previous evening. There I was, carrying groceries inside. There was Florence, my 90-year-old neighbor, waving goodnight from her boat. And there in the background was Brenda peeking from behind her curtains like a suburban spy novel villain. Peterson leaned forward. "That's the night in question?" "Yep. You'll notice I didn't step foot off my own property or make any death threats between bites of chili," he chuckled. "I'll be honest, sir, this complaint doesn't pass the smell test." Then I handed him a folder copies of every false notice, every forged letter, screenshots of her social media rants, and even the statement from the code enforcement officer she'd tried to bribe. Peterson flipped through it, whistling under his breath. "You've been busy, ex-military," I said. "We document everything." The younger deputy was silent, eyes darting between the papers and the screen. "Ma'am," he muttered, as if speaking to the invisible Brenda across the lake, "either you're the world's most polite terrorist, or somebody's wasting our time." Peterson shut the folder and gave me a look that said he was both amused and irritated. "Mr. Shaw, I strongly suggest you consider filing harassment charges. She's been using us as her personal security team, and that stops today." I nodded. "Appreciate it, Sergeant. But I've got a feeling karma's already on the way." As they drove off, I caught sight of Brenda retreating inside, blinds snapping shut like the gates of a fortress under siege. The lake went quiet again, the reflection of flashing lights fading into calm ripples. That night, my phone buzzed with a call from Dave Morrison, a local private investigator who moonlighted at the bait shop. I'd asked him to dig a little deeper into Brenda's past. His voice was half amusement, half disbelief. "Marcus," he said, "you're not going to believe this. She's got a record of unpaid HOA fees, $47,000, worth from her previous community in Minneapolis. Got sued, lost, and skipped town, and nearly dropped the phone." "You're kidding." "Nope. And get this, she's running those illegal rentals without business licenses. She's in violation of at least 3 zoning laws." I looked out at her mansion glowing across the water like a false promise. Every light on, every curtain drawn tight. So that was her secret. The HOA queen was a bankrupt fraud, building her kingdom on lies and overdue bills, and she'd just picked a fight, someone who didn't scare easily. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Because if Brenda wanted to play legal games, I was about to bring a much bigger rulebook. Asterisk, when my lawyer called the next morning. I thought it was just to help file the harassment complaint, but the tone in his voice said otherwise. "Marcus," he said, "you might want to come down to the office. There's something about your grandfather's estate we need to discuss." Arthur Petton had been my family's attorney since before I was born. 78 years old, sharp as ever, and still dressed every day like he was arguing a Supreme Court case. His office smelled like old leather, legal ink, and the faint ghost of cigar smoke. The kind of place where truth didn't just get discovered, it got documented. He gestured for me to sit. "Marcus, I've been re-examining your grandfather's property trust. Something wasn't adding up in the transfer records." He spread out several folders across his desk, each one thick enough to double as a doorstop. I leaned forward as he opened one labeled Northwoods Property Trust. "When your grandfather passed," he said, "you inherited more than the cabin." He turned a page and pointed to a line of small print buried among tax records and trust documents. This trust owns 4 lakefront properties under a holding structure designed for estate tax protection. And according to these signatures, he slid a deed toward me, notarized, sealed, legally binding. You hold the majority interest in the trust. 60%, to be exact. I frowned. Okay, and what does that mean exactly? Arthur smiled, the kind of slow, knowing smile old lawyers give when they're about to drop a bombshell. It means, Mr. Shaw, you're not just a property owner. He flipped to another file, the one labeled Carmichael Lease Agreement. You are Brenda Carmichael's landlord. For a second, the words didn't register. My brain tried to process it, then rejected it like bad coffee. What? I finally said. Arthur pushed the paperwork closer. That $800,000 McMansion she's living in? It's owned by Northwoods Property Trust, the same trust you control. She's been paying rent through a property management company. Those funds have been quietly deposited into a trust account in your name for 3 years. I stared at him, then at the paperwork, then back at him. You're telling me, I said slowly, that the woman who's been calling the cops on me has been paying me rent? Arthur chuckled softly. Every month on the 1st. Though, according to these records, she's now 2 months behind. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A full, unfiltered laugh that probably startled every intern in the building. She's been threatening to fine me for my dock while she's late on her rent. Arthur's expression stayed calm, but his eyes twinkled. Indeed, and it gets better. Her lease prohibits unlicensed business activity, prohibits nuisance behavior, and requires adherence to local law, all of which she's been violating. The irony hit like divine poetry. The self-proclaimed HOA queen had built her empire on property she didn't even own. Arthur leaned back, folding his hands. So, Marcus, how do you want to proceed? You could evict her immediately. File breach of lease, collect damages, the whole 9 yards. I sat there, letting the idea sink in. Eviction would be easy, clean, legal, but it almost felt too small. Like pulling a weed instead of uprooting the entire infestation. No, I said finally. Not yet. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Not yet? She's made this personal, I said. But my grandfather always taught me real power is knowing when not to use it. Let's do this the right way. Let her dig her hole a little deeper. We'll give her every chance to hang herself with her own rope. Arthur smiled. Diplomatic. I like that. But we'll prepare the papers just in case. He slid a crisp envelope across the desk labeled eviction notice, 30 days to vacate. Just seeing it felt like holding a nuclear option. I left his office feeling 10 pounds lighter. The afternoon sun hit the courthouse windows, turning everything gold. The same color that shimmered across the lake every morning for weeks. I'd been playing defense against a tyrant in designer sunglasses. But now, I wasn't the underdog. Now, I was the landlord. As I drove back toward Lake Serenity, the road curved along the water's edge. Brenda's mansion, visible in the distance. Massive, perfect, and completely mine. I almost pitied her. Almost. Because when she'd decided to pick a fight with her uncooperative neighbor, she had no idea she was actually declaring war on her landlord. And this time, I wasn't just defending my peace. I was defending my property. Once I left Arthur's office that afternoon, everything looked different. The trees seemed taller, the air cleaner. Even the lake brighter like the world was finally letting me in on the joke. For months, Brenda had been running around barking orders, flashing fake authority, calling cops and county officials like she was queen of Lake Serenity. But now, I held something she didn't. Leverage. The power dynamic had flipped. And she didn't even know it yet. Arthur and I met again the next morning. His office looked like mission control, folders stacked in perfect columns. Legal pads covered in neat handwritten strategies, and a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. He gestured toward the files. This, he said, is what I like to call the nuclear option playbook. Inside were copies of Brenda's forged HOA notices, records of false police reports, statements from the code officer she tried to bribe, and photos of her illegal short-term rentals, every violation carefully labeled, cross-referenced, and ready to go. Marcus, Arthur said, adjusting his glasses, we'll proceed step by step. Offer mediation first. Courts love seeing you tried to be reasonable. But if she escalates again, we file for eviction. No warnings. No emotion. Just paperwork. I nodded. Understood? And in the meantime, document everything. Every text, every call, every footprint she leaves. He leaned back, smiling slightly. You were in logistics, weren't you? Think of this like a campaign. You already know how to win before the first shot's fired. He wasn't wrong. I spent that evening setting up new high-definition security cameras around my property. Motion sensors, audio recording, night vision, the full fortress treatment. Every angle covered, Janet. Our resident librarian turned intelligence analyst had organized the Truth Squad like a covert ops unit. She built a spreadsheet tracking every incident by date, time, and witness. Florence, the 90-year-old fishing legend, volunteered to keep an eye on that witch's dock from her porch. Tom at the marina kept tabs on Brenda's fuel purchases and rental guests. We were building a wall of evidence so solid, it could survive a hurricane. But if you've ever dealt with someone like Brenda, you know what comes next. When control starts slipping, desperation follows, and desperation makes people reckless. The first sign came one rainy night around midnight. My phone buzzed, motion alert from the dock camera. When I opened the feed, I saw a pickup idling by the shoreline, headlights off. The driver wore a baseball cap, face shadowed. He climbed out, crouched near my boat, and after a few minutes, drove away. The next morning, my heart sank. The drain plug was gone. My boat, my grandfather's old fishing rig, sat half submerged in the water. Motor fried. Gear soaked. It wasn't an accident. Someone had sabotaged it. But Brenda had made one crucial mistake. She forgot I had cameras. There it was, full high-definition footage of her handyman creeping around like a clumsy spy. Muttering under his breath, "Crazy lady, better pay me extra for this." That was all the proof I needed. I filed a police report that afternoon, handed the footage to Deputy Rodriguez, and watched his eyebrows climb toward his hairline. "This just went from civil to criminal," he said. "She's crossed the line." By the end of the week, code enforcement had reopened their investigation. County zoning officers started asking questions about her rental business. The local newspaper editor called, asking if I'd be willing to go on record about ongoing HOA harassment. For the first time, Brenda's empire was cracking. Across the lake, her mansion, once glowing with smug confidence, was now dark most nights. The only light came from her office window, flickering like a desperate beacon. I could almost picture her pacing, furious that the control she'd built on lies was slipping through her fingers. Arthur called that evening. "You're winning, Marcus. But remember, cornered people don't retreat. They lash out." He was right. The war wasn't over. It was about to hit its loudest, ugliest, most public stage. And I was ready. Asterisk. If you've never seen 300 small-town residents packed into a high school gymnasium for a routine town council meeting, imagine a mix between a courtroom drama, a championship game, and a public execution, all rolled into one. Folding chairs filled every inch of the floor. The bleachers overflowed. The smell of popcorn from the concession stand mixed with the scent of rain-soaked jackets and anticipation. Even the local TV station had shown up. Cameras lined along the back wall. Red lights blinking like recording beacons of justice. Word had spread fast. The Lake Serenity HOA war had become local legend. Brenda arrived fashionably late, course strutting in like she was walking a red carpet instead of her own downfall. White power suit. Oversized sunglasses. Her lawyer, a slick Twin Cities type with a $1,000 tie and a face that looked allergic to humility, trailed behind her. Already sweating, when she spotted me near the front row. She smirked like a cat who thought the mouse hadn't noticed the trap, but she didn't know the trap wasn't for me. When the council chair tapped the mic, the crowd quieted. Next on the agenda, Lake Serenity Homeowners Association and related community disputes. That was my cue. I stood, folder in hand, heart steady as a drumbeat. 3 months ago, I began. I thought I was dealing with a nosy neighbor. I was wrong. Arthur had coached me to keep it simple, factual, and surgical. But once I started, the words poured out with the calm precision of a man who'd had enough. I told them about the fake fines, the forged letters, the police harassment, the sabotage every documented incident. As I spoke, Arthur projected each piece of evidence onto the gym's pull-down screen. Scanned notices, photos, time-stamped video stills. Gasps rippled through the audience. Then came the real showstopper. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, holding up a deed and lease agreement thick enough to stop a bullet for the past 3 years. "I've been the legal owner of the property Miss Carmichael has been living in. She's been paying rent to me through a trust rent she is currently 2 months behind on." The crowd erupted like a stadium after a buzzer beater. Applause, laughter, even a few cheers. Brenda froze. The blood drained from her face so fast, it was almost art. Her lawyer's expression crumpled, like bad origami. "I'm not here for revenge," I continued, raising my voice over the noise. "I'm here for truth." This lake was built on community. People who waved to each other, helped each other, and minded their own business. Brenda destroyed that trust. But tonight, we take it back. Arthur advanced the next slide. Audio recordings of Brenda's bribery attempts with county officials. The room went dead silent, except for her voice playing through the speakers, honey-sweet and venomous. "I have a proposition that could benefit both of us." The county attorney sitting in the front row started writing furiously in his notepad. Brenda snapped, "This is all lies." She shouted, standing so fast her chair clattered to the floor. "He's been conspiring against me. This whole town's jealous of my success." Her voice cracked under the weight of her own panic. Florence, our 90-year-old fishing matriarch sitting in the front row, leaned forward and said loud enough for the entire gym to hear, "Honey, the only thing we're jealous of is your imagination." The place erupted in laughter so loud it rattled the basketball hoops. Brenda's lawyer tried to calm her, whispering something that clearly translated to "sit down before you dig deeper," but she couldn't stop herself. She pointed at me with shaking hands. "You'll regret this, Marcus. You can't evict me. I'll sue." I held up the crisp envelope Arthur had handed me earlier. "Ms. Carmichael, as your landlord, this is your official 30-day notice to vacate for multiple lease violations." The crowd rose to its feet. Applause thundered through the gym, echoing off the walls. People were clapping, whistling, cheering. Even the sheriff gave a slow, approving nod. Brenda stood frozen, tears of fury welling in her eyes. Her perfect public image had just crumbled in front of every witness she'd ever tried to intimidate. Arthur leaned toward her lawyer. "You might want to advise your client that the county attorney's office will be in touch about the bribery evidence." Brenda turned pale, eyes darting toward the exit. For once, she didn't have a speech, a smile, or a script. Just silence. When she finally stormed out, heels clacking across the gym floor. The entire room exhaled at once, the collective sigh of a community, finally freed from one person's insanity. As the crowd dispersed, Florence patted my shoulder. "Told you, son," she said, grinning. "Patience always beats crazy." I looked across the gym, where the last of the applause faded like waves against the dock. For the first time in months, the lake felt calm again. Not just the water, but the people. And for the first time since Brenda had arrived, Lake Serenity finally lived up to its name. 2 weeks after the town hall meeting, the lake was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No shouting. No fake inspectors. No echo of Brenda's pontoon engine tearing through the peace. Just the sound of loons calling across still water and the gentle slap of waves against the dock. The sheriff's department had opened a formal investigation into her forged documents and attempted bribery. Her HOA was officially dissolved. Every fake rule, every phony fine, gone like smoke in the wind. And as for Brenda, she'd moved out. Well, forced out, technically. The eviction went through without a single delay. Arthur handled the paperwork like a surgeon. When she finally packed her things, it wasn't in the middle of the night, it was broad daylight. In front of everyone, she'd spent months trying to intimidate. Half the town gathered quietly along the road, pretending to be out for walks as the moving truck pulled away. Nobody said a word, but you could feel it, the collective exhale of an entire community reclaiming its peace. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching her car disappear down the highway, and for the first time since this all began, the air around the lake felt lighter. A few days later, Florence came by with a plate of her famous pecan pie. She sat on my porch swing, kicked off her sandals, and grinned. "Well, landlord," she said, "guess the lake's yours again?" I laughed. "Guess so. Though technically, it always was." She chuckled. "You handled that better than most would have. Didn't yell, didn't fight dirty. You let her drown in her own nonsense." "That's what Grandpa always said," I replied, staring at the ripples across the water. "Never wrestle a pig. You both get muddy, but the pig enjoys it." Florence smiled. He was a smart man. Life slowly returned to normal after that. The marina reopened. Neighbors started waving again. Someone even organized a Lake Serenity cleanup day, which turned into a potluck picnic and bonfire. Kids fished off the docks, dogs chased sticks, and the laughter that had been missing for months filled the air again. Janet stood beside me, holding a clipboard, proud as ever. "You know," she said, "we should form an actual community council. No dues, no drama, just people looking out for each other." I nodded. Now that's an organization worth joining. As the sun dipped behind the pines, painting the lake gold and amber, I walked to the edge of the dock, the same spot where this whole story had started. The same place Brenda had first strutted up, trying to lay down her fake laws. I looked down at my reflection in the water and couldn't help but smile. She'd tried to own the lake through fear. I'd reclaimed it through patience, truth, and time. And that's the thing about karma, it doesn't need help. It just needs a little silence and a good view. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. Official court stationery. Brenda had pleaded guilty to multiple counts of document fraud and illegal business operation. Her Lake Serenity HOA was now part of a legal case. Study in the county's civic ethics course. The final paragraph of the letter made me laugh out loud, as part of restitution. Ms. Carmichael has agreed to pay all outstanding rent and damages to the property owner, Mr. Marcus Shaw. The check was enclosed. I never even cashed it. I framed it instead a reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's peace. Now every morning, I sit on that same dock, coffee steaming in my hand, watching the fog lift off the lake like a curtain rising on a new day. And when the wind's just right, you can almost hear the lake whisper back, calm, steady, and free again. Lake Serenity finally lives up to its name. Asterisk, when people ask me now what really happened at Lake Serenity, I tell them it wasn't about property lines or fake HOAs, or even rent. It was about control. There are people in this world who build their identity around power, the kind that only works when everyone else stays silent. They thrive on fear, manipulation, and the illusion of authority. They wear titles like armor and hide insecurity behind paperwork and rules, but the truth is simple. You can't control people who know who they are. Brenda thought she could turn kindness into weakness. She mistook patience for submission. But what she never understood, and what life eventually taught her, is that quiet people aren't powerless. They're just waiting for the right moment to speak, and when they do, the noise of lies doesn't stand a chance. That's the lesson I took from all this. Sometimes strength doesn't look like shouting or slamming doors or fighting back in the same dirty way. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like keeping your calm while the storm destroys itself. Because when you stand on truth and document every move, eventually, even the loudest storm runs out of thunder. Lake Serenity taught me that real peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the ability to stay grounded while the world around you tries to pull you into chaos. Brenda lost everything she built on deception. Not because I fought harder, but because I refused to play her game. And that's something. I tell anyone facing their own Brenda in life, the boss who bullies, the neighbor who manipulates, the person who abuses power. You don't have to match their volume to win. You just have to outlast their lies with truth, patience, and a clear conscience. The lake is calm again now. The mornings are quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Sometimes I still see the faint outline of her old dock posts across the water, slowly sinking back into nature. The lake reclaims what doesn't belong here. It always does. As the seasons turn and the first autumn breeze sweeps across the pines, I can almost hear my grandfather's voice echoing over the water, "Son, you don't have to prove you're right. Just let time prove them wrong." And time did exactly that. Lake Serenity isn't just my home now. It's a reminder. A reminder that justice doesn't always come from courts or cops or loud confrontations. Sometimes it comes quietly, with paperwork, patience, and the truth that refuses to drown. So, to anyone listening, remember this. You can't control what others do to you, but you can control how you respond, and that's where your real power lives. Because in the end, peace isn't given. It's taken back, and that's exactly what I did.